Thank you, Mrs. Harland. Good morning to everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Mr. Robert Hutchings. I'll be chairing the hearing today. I'm joined on the panel by Mr. Kent Seelan and Mr. Ian Mon. Our secretary today is Mrs. Harland, and our assessor representing the Assessment and Taxation Department is Mr. Matthew Barocas. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by this Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with this board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following their swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questioning. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions based on the evidence presented here today. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 8 on our docket today. Mrs. Harland, please affirm the assessor and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, would you please state your full name?
Matthew Barocas.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, would you please state your full name?
Rocky Neufeld.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Harland. Good morning to both parties. Mr. Neufeld, your camera is off your face.
Yeah. That's as good as it gets.
Okay.
It's
Thank
not
you.
a good mount.
Okay. All right. Okay. Item number 1 is the first item on the docket today. We're dealing with file number 24-4357, roll number 12-021-555-000. Address is 503 Corden Avenue, and we're dealing with a 2025 realty assessment. Mr. Barocas, when you are ready, please.
All right. Thank you very much. File 24-4120, roll number 11010233000, 200 Rupert's Land Avenue, 2025. Roll year April 1st, 2023. Reference date assessed value 989.
Mr. Barocas, I think we're on 503 Corden Avenue.
Oh, sorry.
First item. Yeah.
I apologize. Okay.
Item number 1.
Oh yeah, okay. I just had them listed wrong. My apologies. File number 24-4357, roll number 12021555000, 503 Corden Avenue. It's an apartment. It's 2025 assessment. reference here, April 1st, 2023, 832,000. We've got actual year built of 1953 and no effective year built applied to it, 8 suites, 5 outdoor parking spots as per our records. Going to page 2, you see that no recent sales history, and then they very consistently handed in their information to us. So on page 3, this shows the modeled valuation. It's 4 bachelor, 4 1-bedroom, 8 units total, average monthly rent $849 and 12 cents, with a 3.2 modeled vacancy rate and a 48.87 expense ratio, 4.85 cap. And it comes with a capitalized estimated market value of $832,000 rounded, or 104 market value per suite, 104,000. The rent comparables are on, pardon me, they're found on page 4. And so you see they range from $867 dollars per unit to $942. We're at $849. We're within the range. One thing is to note that these comparables, only one of them has a bachelor unit. Having a higher proportion overall of bachelor units, they typically obviously will rent less than a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom. So we're at the lower end of the range, but I feel like we're okay because we're below the lowest column. On page 5, we've got some sample sales, pardon me. Following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. It's just to illustrate the accuracy of the model. Derived cap rates, not meant to be comparable specific to this property or any other subject property. The list is the same for every property on this docket on our side of their presentation. So, this list isn't going to change. So basically what I did is I looked at the income and expense statements. I found properties with 3 years of income and expense statements leading up to the sale date. And then I stabilized income and expenses, and based on the sale price, a cap rate was generated. I looked to see if there were permits for renovations immediately taken out after the sale. I checked to see if they were associated. Just based on the information I had, I looked over all those things. I tried to find the best arm's length sales, and these are the ones I could find. I didn't find any and leave them out. Some of these are from last go around as well. We should see the cap rate range from about 3.5 all the way to 5 3/4. So at 4.85, we are within the range, and yeah, cap rate chart here on page 6 just shows the general 20th to 80th percentile. You see it's 4.75 and 5.5 for 20th to 80th. So we're within that range. We're on the lower end of the range. This is a comparatively lower value property, so there'd be a bigger pool of potential purchasers able to get in on the action. So over a stabilized NOI, that's gonna, push the cap rate down. People bidding against each other, getting a higher sale price. It's only, $104,000 per suite on Gordon. I don't think that we've overshot it on this one. There's some pictures on page 8. Pardon me. Going forward, you see the top part here of the apartment from an aerial, and Then we have got May 2023 picture from the outside, and then May 2021. So it looks like they at least painted it. Maybe did a little bit of touch up on the stucco, but it doesn't look like they did anything major in terms of renovations. So this one, when you look at the income and expense mailer, they actually have like a sister property beside it. And the income and expenses are reported all as one. Now, with this property and the other property, they both have 4 bachelor and 4 one-bedrooms. And for whatever reason, I'm not sure, the expense ratio on the other property is slightly higher at 52.87%. So what I'm actually going to do right now is make a recommendation on this property. So the recommendation, sorry, I'm a bit working backwards here because I thought the other one was coming first. I'll make a recommendation using the effective gross income of $78,907. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to apply a 52.87 expense ratio to it, which will create expenses of $41,718 and a net operating income of $37,189. And with that same cap rate, it generates a reduction to $767,000 total. They're twin properties. They should have the same assessment. They have the same unit breakdown. So there should be some consistency there on our part. So I'm going to make that rec. I would have made it earlier, but I was trying to thought the other property was coming first. The income and expenses are reported together. I just took the model on this one. So yeah, my recommendation is $767,000 or $95,875 unit. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Neufeld, before we begin with the questioning, do you have rebuttal that's going to be presented?
Yes, I filed it about 30 minutes ago, and I don't know what order you want to take that in.
We're going to have questioning by you and the panel, and then we're going to deal with the rebuttal immediately.
Okay.
But if you have any questions on the evidence presented by the assessor, including the recommended verbal recommendation to revise the assessment value from $832,000 down to $767,000.
No, we're not. We don't believe that that's an appropriate number. So we'll just carry on.
Okay, perfect.
And sorry, my questions are going to be not really in order here, but during your presentation, you made the comment that the rent applied is below the lowest comparison, and you thought it was fair. Doesn't that fail the test of logic? You haven't proven anything, have you?
The test of logic?
Yeah, if you have a range and it's not in the range, you haven't proven anything.
Well, looking at the comps, I mean, they're predominantly 1 and 2 bedroom comps in the vicinity. So when it would make sense logically that the monthly rent that we're assigning the property, the model is, would be below the average monthly rent comparables 1 through 4, because they have larger units, and larger units, all else being the same, would, be able to demand higher rent. So to me, it is logical that it is lower than the range of comparables.
Well, I guess the point is, if it's outside the range, where outside the range? That's not the
That-
proper theory, is it? I mean, at least not the way I was trained.
Well, it is below the range.
Okay. Um, on, and you mentioned that the subject property was comprised of uh, two properties, and they're operated together, and those statements were presented on
Mhm.
page 10. The joint NOI is higher than your department's NOI. So in other words, it's twice as high. Your model is twice as high as the actual performance. Did that not give you some concern?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be something that's kind of like a consistent thread through these properties. I've found, I mean, they're reporting 75% expenses on, I mean, just the most recent year, which is, I mean, much higher than we typically see for apartments. I mean, they seem to be reporting an extremely high vacancy as well, based on page 11. So I'm not really sure what's going on in this property, but it seems atypical. We see typically vacancy rates in 3% range, and this one is much higher than that. The expenses are much higher. So without having a more in-depth knowledge of the property, I wasn't comfortable making a change greater than the
Okay,
one I made.
so, but the question is, if you haven't proven, satisfied the burden of proof, then have you? If the actual performance is lower than your model, do you not have an obligation to meet the burden of proof as specified by the Municipal Assessment Act that you are correct when the facts speak differently?
Well, the facts seem to be atypical to what we see based on the income and expense mailers of other properties, in the area, in the city. Typically, when we see expense ratios getting up into the 75,000, I mean, there's either an issue where they're putting a lot of money into repairs, or they're sorry, 75% of the expense ratio. They're renovating. There's something atypical going on. So I don't have like a breakdown of the repair and maintenance. I'm not sure why they're reporting such a high vacancy, whether it's some kind of chronic issue or not. So when the facts are, they seem to be an outlier based on what we've seen in the general. Like, I mean, I've been doing this job for a while. I just look at other things. Like, I look at the fact that based on my recommendation, I've knocked it down to like 95,000 per unit, off an apartment, off court. Some of them are bachelors. That doesn't seem very high to me based on my experience and the area. So I just left it in the model's hands.
Okay, so to summarize, you don't know, I'm using your words, you don't know, it seems. There's some typical comments there. And but my question concerned the law, the burden of proof. Do you think you've met the burden of proof when you don't have, you're quite honestly answered, I don't know. So how can you meet the burden of proof?
Okay, Mr. Neufeld, let's make this simple. The assessor is presenting the evidence that he believes is correct in the evaluation of the property. You can question him on that evidence presented. If you disagree with that evidence, you'll have your opportunity to present it in your evidence. Right now, we're cross-examining him on his evidence presented. But you can present your opinion of what he's done wrong in your evidence. So can we continue, please?
Yeah, I'm really sorry, but I don't accept that because the act is the prevailing issue here. We are charged with the burden. The assessor has to satisfy a burden of proof, and the board has to determine if he satisfied it
Well, how
And
about,
when opinions don't satisfy burden of proof.
when it's your turn to present your evidence, you can present that argument. Now is not the time to do it. Or you've asked and we understand where you're coming from, but let's move on about the evidence presented by the assessor in fact.
On page, again, I'm out of order here, but I was first looking on page 6. And this is the summary chart you presented. What are you characterizing this as in your multifamily rows here?
Okay, sorry, what page is that? Page 11?
Page 6.
Page 6, okay. Well, I mean, they all have the same range, low rise. I don't know what category it would fall into. The A-B determination looks like it's something that CBRE makes. The city of Winnipeg also has that range filled out. I don't know the difference between A and B. I assume A is nicer, but how A is different than low rise without a letter after it, I couldn't tell you. They
Okay.
have the same range.
And when you inserted these statements from brokerages, or when you were told to insert these, was there any effort made to get authorization from these companies to use their data and fulfill the requirements that are listed with them?
I mean, this is like an automatic insert. I couldn't answer that definitively. I would assume the people that you'd have to ask them that question. I don't know.
Okay. And was there any concern that your rates were varied from what was reported in the industry?
I mean, like we're pretty close. Like Collier's, he got 5 to 6. I mean, we're at 4 3/4 and 5.5. So I mean, there's a bit of a shift there. I mean, we're kind of all in the same ballpark. I'm not sure. Maybe there's a different way in which brokerages go about creating their cap rates. But I think we're in the same general ballpark. I know Collier's doesn't have the range under 5, so I could probably speak to that better than I can.
Do any of these companies report capitalization rates for units like the subject? And I meant in terms of age, size, quality. Do you know anything about the guidelines they use to apply to these rates?
I know just based on looking through, I mean, some of your evidence and the evidence in the past, I know some might calculate using the NOI before the sale. Some might use it after the sale. Whether in regards to the property would be included in the range, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I was speaking to quality issues as though, and like, do large firms, commercial brokerages track apartments like this, which are small and older?
I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Okay.
I don't know.
And what was the impact on the model of the interest rate change?
You know, I'm not sure. I don't have that sort of information in my evidence, so I don't know, and I can't certainly point at anything to speak to it.
Okay. And on your page 5, the data that was used to make these rates, can we assume this all came from your income and expense forms?
Yep.
And in that data, was there an indication of what interest rate their mortgage was at?
No, that was not something that was reviewed.
And in that data, were you able to determine whether or not they had received their Manitoba school tax credit?
I just looked at what they reported to us. So again, what they reported under their property tax expenditure for the year, that's what I would have put into that column for the purpose of stabilizing.
Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Seelan, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
Yes, the cap rate, was that cap rate model driven or is that cap rate something that you chose?
That is a modeled cap rate.
Okay. Your recommendation, could you just give us your numbers?
Oh,
Let's take
yeah.
the time for your recommendation. I just want to confirm what you had.
Yeah, for sure. It's actually the workup for 507, and in case you're wondering, but the effective gross income is still 78,907.
Okay.
And then the expenses are 41,718.
Mhm.
And then that's a net operating income of 37,189.
Okay.
And same cap 485. So the rounded market value is 700,067 or 767,000.
Awesome. Thank you. That's all my questions. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Seelan. Mr. Mon, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Barakas. The cap rate table or the capitalization rate evidence that you have presented on page 5, are those sales and calculations of cap rates incorporated in the capitalization rate table on page 6?
I mean, I'm not part of the modeling process, but I know they do look at sales. They look at sales when coming up with the cap rate. The table on page 5, these are the ones that I found through the Excel spreadsheet, and I combed through them looking for arm's length stuff based on our information that had 3 years, relatively consistent performing income and expense statements with the sale price to come up with a cap rate.
Okay, thank you. Now, the expense ratio you were talking at the start when you adjusted the final NOI for 503 Cordon, and you adjusted the expense rate to 52.87%. Why did you assume that 52.87? Sorry, on what basis did you establish that 52.87, or is that just lifted from the 507 Cordon expense rate?
Yeah, they're both they're like sister properties. As the applicant mentioned, they operate kind of like as one unit. They're just on different PIDs. They both have 4 bachelor, 4 1-bedroom. They should, going by a modeled basis, have the same expense ratio applied to them. So one at 48, one at 52. I applied 52 to the one that had 48 for the sake of consistency.
Okay. And my last question is, more than a methodology question, but in your evidence, you have outlined a cost per suite approach. And with the new $767,000 value, you come up, I think you said around $95,000 per suite. In your table that you presented as well on page 5, there is $ suite. I'm assuming that's cost per suite as well.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you elect to put that in? We're not using a cost method here, but can you explain why that's in, please?
Oh, it's not meant like the cost of construction, just like the overall sale price per suite, if you looked at it on a per suite basis. And you can see that there's a range, the newer ones, we don't have any newer ones today, McPhillips, it's up over 200 a suite because it's newer, and there's one that goes into it, and there's older ones as well that are way down, and that makes sense based on their your bill. You take things like their area and stuff into consideration. It's just another thing for the panel to look at.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further.
Thank you, Mr. Mont. I have no questions of the assessor. Now it's the understanding that the applicant has filed a rebuttal to the assessor's evidence presented. Mrs. Harland, I guess we would have to, is it is it in our SharePoint, or do you have to add it?
It's in the SharePoint right now. I just added it. So if you can all please take a look, and I'll email it to the assessor.
Thank you. So we will wait until we all receive the information before we proceed, Mr. Neufeld.
Yeah, I copied Matthew earlier on it. I don't know if he's got it.
Yeah, I got it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Oh, the assessor has it.
Sorry, that's the one titled MF rebuttal.
That's it.
Yeah, I've got it.
Thank you, Mr. Mon.
I have it, Mr. Chair, too.
And I have it now too, also, Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready.
Thank you. So there's, I'll go through this in order. Let's start with the two issues regarding comparables on my page 1. These were changes that were in effect on April 1st, 2023 that the model did not pick up. I have had discussions with many people in the multifamily department at the assessment and told them about my concerns early on in this process. But essentially, for years, people in our business, whether it be appraisers or assessors, have generally been pretty lazy on adjusting sales for the interest rate because we've had a period of fairly steady rates and often declining rates, and as they declined, the cap rates declined, and we've all seen that in the last 20 years, them steadily dropping. So what's different now is April 1st, 2021, the announcement by the Bank of Canada that interest rates are going up. And on the last page of this document is the Bank of Canada rate from over the years. And you can see that the low point was in 2021, where the rate was 0.5%. That's the Bank of Canada's rate. And of course, banks then add their own points on top of it. By the time in April of 2023, the rate was 4.75%, or 9 times higher. Now, the impact of this is just common sense. A cap rate is comprised of the interest rate. You borrow money to get a return, which is your cap rate. And if it costs more to borrow money, then your cap rate your rate of return has to go up. And what we see in the market, when you look at the assessor's rates and the rates that many people use, is that they're not checking the interest rate on the property. And the theory I provided is one that like I said, it's been forgotten, but it is important. On the second page, and this from the Appraisal Institute, and this is not just Appraisal Institute stuff. This is doctrine everybody must follow in valuation. And the second most important property adjustment are the financing terms. Now, there are ways to adjust preferential financing or detrimental financing. And the most typical way is to look at it as a picture in time on a 5-year term. What is your benefit or what is your cost? And then amortize it over term. And for that period, then you can make an adjustment on your NOI on the impact of the interest rate, which is what our brokers do when we report. The second issue has to do with the Manitoba school tax credit, and on my third page is the news release from 2023. It refers to the previous year where it was 37.5% of the school tax was rebated for residential properties, the subject being one of them. It applied to multifamily. So what that meant is that for a property like this, I'm going to just do the math real quick. I hadn't even thought of it, but it would be about yeah, it would be about $11,000, the rebate. And but in the cap rates, were those rebates applied for the income with fairly significant amounts of money? In 22, the rebate came out and it was a check that was mailed to the owner, which may or may not have been received in time for their statements. So I think the onus is on the assessment department to show whether or not the rebate was noted in their income and expense forms. And they haven't done that. And again, that's going back to this is important. When the brokers we work with do it all because we take it into account when we do our cap rates. And the reason ours are higher is because we know that money's coming in, and when we do our cap rate, we add it to the income, and then it demonstrates the higher rate than what the city has. So these are two changes that, as I said, based on my discussions with the assessment department, my questions of the assessor, they don't know. And I think it's fair to say that when you use dated income, that they're going to have low interest rates, and we're going to have a lag on that property school tax credit that's not showing up. So in order for them to bring forward comparable rates, we need to see those adjustments. And you'll see later on that I did bring two forward where we actually did those adjustments. It's the reality. This isn't something artificial. It's simple. It's follow the money. That's what real estate's all about. The last issue is on the, sorry, I didn't mark the pages. The fourth page is the use of the Collier's cap rate. First of all, remind everybody that their city is not an authorized user. They use it. There's a disclaimer on it that do your own due diligence. And we discovered an error in the Winnipeg rate for Q1 and Q2 of 2023. As far as we can tell, what happened was that the table was never updated from the previous year. There was no input made those years. So what we've done is our vice president has sent a letter out that just to indicate that there's the Q1, Q2 are not reliable, and then the Q4 of 2022 and Q3 of 2023, which of course is post-reference, were reviewed and verified. So essentially, we have to rely on for the college report. It's Q4 2022, and you'll note that our apartment rates were 5.5 to 6.5. That is a reflection of the interest rates that table that are shown on the final page, because they are a factor in determining a cap rate. Essentially, in my business, if you use a cap rate that has not been adjusted for the interest rate, you would be misleading the users of the report. And I think the same truth has to apply to the assessment department, that if you do not check into that, you are misleading. and provide the backup data, and we can look at it. So that's those are the points with the assessment department workup that I wanted to bring forward.
Thank you. Excuse me. Does the assessor have any questions on the rebuttal evidence presented?
I do not at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Mon, any questions of the applicant's rebuttal?
Just one for clarification with respect to the school tax rebate. As noted, that rebate would call into question the income and expense mailer where it shows the property taxes as an expense. And if that was added in, it would increase the NOI, not decrease it. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, it increases the NOI. No, and we're not talking about the subjects. We know the subjects are in there because I checked. What it does is it increases the NOI for the cap rate comparables, which increases the cap rate, and that's my point.
If it's reported.
Well, yeah, but again, if it's reported, if it's not reported, we know about it. There's a news release from the government. We know the money's out there. If you don't report it, and then somebody uses your data to inflict a financial penalty on somebody else, then it's up to the person bringing that data forward to clarify it for the board. It's not a question of finding someone else to blame here and saying, oh, it's too bad. We know it's there. Anybody working this business knows it's there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mon. Mr. Seelan, any questions of the applicant's rebuttal?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
To the applicant, Mr. Neufeld. So I think to simplify, you're saying that we should ignore the Collier's cap rate figures?
No, they should be accepted as amended, and that we've also presented them as evidence on our own report. At the time we did this, we used the Q4 2022, and it wasn't until after.
I understand that, but the point is the evidence presented by the assessor, and that's what we're rebutting, not your revised or evidence you're presenting, should be ignored by the panel.
I think that's your choice. My opinion would be that they failed to do their due diligence. I'm doing it for them. Replace it.
Understood. But you did say that it's in error. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you. Okay, now, Mr. Neufeld, it is your turn. Bear with us one second while we pull up your brief, please. All right, Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. Page 1. Again, I think you've heard this all. It's 8 units, bachelors and 1 bedrooms, not a great mix. And the statement is combined. I didn't do this workup, and we're training right now, but the mistake here on the selection of the expense ratio is that in 2022 it was higher and noticeably higher, the R&M expenses, and they should have been stabilized. And so the math on this is rather tricky, but essentially the 2022 number should actually be about $49,000, not $55,000. That's because they stabilized it. The assessor had the 2021 statements in his evidence, and that year the R&M was $18,989. In 22 it was $43,967. That they would stabilize out in the middle, and half that would be subtracted bit because it's 2 units. So my rough calculation of what we should be doing with this is reducing the the expenses to $48,000, and I'm just rounding, which and then the other error on this is that we should have been using the 2022 income at 74,411. And I'm rounding everything here, but I'm getting an NOI that I think should be adjusted to 26,441. And that increases our value to 377,728. We're rounded to 380,000. The calculation on the page one is starts with a base rate of the best property, the best apartment rate, which in our books is 5.5%. And then looking at the deficiencies in it, and you've heard this all before, we include closing costs. So I'm looking in there, that's what we call 3 points. That really works out to 0.1%. These are all small adjustments. Going through it, it's a good location and lots of good things about it. The real downside is the building size, which is 8 units, and the layout, which is 1 bedrooms and bachelors. The problem with it is everybody's already caught on to this. Look at that expense ratio. When you have a building with very few units, your expense ratio is higher and varies more. And because it's high is because all costs of apartments are a mix of variable costs. Variables flow with the user, which is say the utilities, and then hard fixed costs, which are fixed whether you have 100 units or you have 8 units. You know, the best analogy is very simple. Most apartments have 2 doors, back and front. If you got to fix a door and you have one on an 8-unit apartment, it costs you $100 a suite. If you got it on a 80-unit building, it costs you $10 a suite. And that's why small units would have a higher cap. Now, you often don't see that in the marketplace because some of the smaller units, if they sell for high, is the investigation has to be done is to determine if there's an element of owner occupancy. A lot of smaller units are bought and lived in by an owner and then has the other units for his paying his mortgage off. That's not an investment property. It can't be adjusted. So something to watch out for. And I'm digressing from my capitalization rate discussion. And then the design and layout with 1 bedrooms and bachelors, again, very low potential for increasing your earnings. The best mix is 1 and 2 bedroom apartments in Winnipeg. It's a flexibility for users. And in the case of this particular property owner, they have some pretty good loyalty from their tenants. So as life changes and relationships change, you ain't go from a 1 bedroom, you move next door to the 2 bedroom. Or it changes the other way, you go from a 2 bedroom back to a 1 bedroom, you stay in the building. And this is a stabilization of income and also a positive feature. Bachelor units are not desirable for investment purposes. Other than that, then the other issue is just age related, year built, quality and condition. Of course, it's not new. And we came up with 6.5%. Now, bear with me here. This is our first go around. I have some new people here and we were training them. I know who did this. Yeah, the cap should have been 6.5, not 7. Sorry about that. I'll do my number again. We don't have a model. We do everything by hand. So the 26441 divided by 0.065. Sorry, revised value is 406,784 and rounded to 410,000. Pictures on page 2. There's the statement, page 3, and you'll see our problem in our workup is we had the 20 and the 22 statements. We couldn't find the 21s, and that's why I made the change later on. Moving on to page 15. This is again, I'm not making this theory up. There's a direct relationship between interest rates and cap rates. In 2021, when interest rates started to move, Colliers started tracking, remembering the old way of doing a cap rate, which was the spread from the interest rate to the cap rate. That's the simplified way. In appraisers, we would call it the mortgage equity method or the weighted average cost of capital. And essentially, a simplification of it is the cap rate always has a point spread to the interest rate. And it's between 3 and 4%, depending on the desirability of the profit of the property in the marketplace. So, and these aren't Bank of Canada rates. This is the best rate. So, for example, many of the properties that the assessor has brought in are carrying CMHC mortgages at 1.75%. So the spread on that is 3 points, gets you a 4.75% cap for a 5-year period, and then it renews. So if the Bank of Canada rate goes to 4.75, the new CMHC rate was actually fairly competitive in the mid fours. That puts you up to a cap rate of 7.5% by the same calculation. And then, but there's always a question in the market: optimism, pessimism. If your rate is low, it's going to go up, so you set a higher spread. If your rate is high, it's going to go down, so you set a lower spread. Which is why we ended up at 6.5, which was only 2 points higher than the interest rate, because there was a belief that they would go down, and actually, as we heard a couple of weeks ago, it is going down. So our analysis today has been this way, and the reason we're putting a lot more emphasis on this is that it's easier to look at the market and figure out what an apartment should sell for or what you should pay for it. And there have been so few put on the market that have bad financing because you won't get a decent rate of return. The ones that are selling today are still ones that have the remnant CMHC mortgage at 1.75%. And they're out for 5 years. And that last time that rate was offered was, I think, in March of 2021. That's what's happening with interest rates. So the Collier's job then is to figure out how this interest rate, the market would approach it. And so we weren't totally pessimistic. We knew it was going to go down, but we had to bump it up overall. So you'll note that our cap rate went from 5 to 5.5. That was only a half point jump in the cap for the interest rate because it was believed to be a short-term impact. But as of April 1st, 2023, that's what we saw. The real number is actually 5.6% that our brokerage department set as their lowest rate at that particular time. So there's some discussion here that I don't know, no one reads. I'm going down to page 27, and there again is the Bank of Canada rates that we put in there just to reflect on the interest rate at the time. So I find it rather interesting that the model in the city can determine that a 4.85% rate exists when the cost of money at the bank, even Bank of Canada, which is subprime, if you got it, is 4.75%. It's wrong, and the two are directly related. It's not an indirect. The only difference is what is the optimism, pessimism, the anticipation of how the market will treat these increases. Everybody wants to make money. 4.85%, you're not making money. The cap rate, as I mentioned, we used Q4 2022. We had caught this error in August, and it wasn't until about that letter was written, September 11th.
Mr. Newton, you're repeating yourself from the rebuttal evidence that you presented. Can we kind of just summarize?
Well, I'm at page 29 and explaining why I used Q4 2022 in my report.
I think you already told us that in your rebuttal when you were presenting that evidence, citing the assessors and methodology. So can
Yes,
we?
but at that point you said you may consider dismissing it. So this is new now.
No, I asked you if you think we should dismiss it. I was just
Okay.
your opinion. But anyway, let's proceed, please.
Well, the only solace here I can give you is we don't go through this twice. Give me some bit of leeway here to go through it once in the detail that I would like to do, and then we don't have to listen to it 7 more times.
Proceed.
So we were aware there was a problem, which wasn't, we didn't figure out till later. And the numbers on page 29, multifamily, 5.5 to 6.5. This is broker derived, actual transactions, actual verified transactions. Page 21 is, 31 is I've highlighted in red, and the double-digit cap rates seem possible in 2023 for a few select assets as an impact of the new rate environment in every market. So what we have in Canada, Manitoba, Winnipeg, for the first time in decades, is an increase. And Winnipeg has always never really had this sort of an increase. Other markets have felt it. They go up and down. We haven't. So this is the first time. And we have to be resolved that it's going to, in our assessment system, reassessment every 2 years, going to impact and create lower values in 23. The glossary on page 32 are the descriptions of what we at Colliers put in our ratings. And these are the same as the other major firms, because this is where our competition is. The low rise is lower density multifamily residential buildings, typically four stories or fewer, with or without elevators. Now, that's a rather vague description. So what we've done is we've actually clarified this. And oh no, I didn't put that in. Sorry. If you look in terms of ratings, A, B, C, D, this is a D. Colliers does A's and B's. So do the other people. The cap rates on the inferior properties is always higher. We did, however, have 2 transactions to report on page 35 and 36. Now, the 441 Edison, and I'm going to give this to Mr. Baracus as soon as he asked me for it, the complete workup, 5.89%. Now, this building was, cap rate was calculated by the adjustment for the interest rate. They inherited a 1.75% rate. It's been adjusted for, and the school tax credit has been properly applied, because in the statements used, which were produced before the sale, they had not yet received their check. But for the sale, you have to take into account, and that's 5.89. A similar situation occurred on 160 Lumsden. This incidentally is the same purchaser, and it's the same purchaser is the owner of the subject property. They bought both these buildings. This one was 6.04. Now the title didn't sorry, the first one on Edison was an offering in 2022. A deal was put together and it fell through. Then in 2024, it was sold as a share sale, so you won't see it on when you search for the sale. We were looking at the first transaction because the data on the first transaction was produced for the first transaction that fell through. Whereas the other one on Lumsden, the deal closed on March. I'm trying to get the specific date in March. I thought I had it here. And then it was titled in October because it was sat with conditions had to be lifted, but the deal was cut in the reference period. Again, the adjustments were there for the financing school credit, 6.04%. So these were sold in the interest rate market where Bank of Canada was 4.75, and the optimism was it's going to drop before the owner then can adjust his financing and perhaps take a shorter term or a flex mortgage on the hope that it's going to go down, and so the impact isn't as great, but it still suggests, as I said earlier, 0.5 to 0.6% higher rates than would have been seen 2 years prior. And these are properties that are in similar class and grade as the subject. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Baracus, any questions of the applicant's evidence presented?
Yeah, just a few, and they're going to be mostly on cap, so I don't have to do it 7 times. I'm going to ask that the board kind of roll these questions to the other properties, try and speed us along here.
You summarize that request in each file, please.
Okay, thanks. All right. On page 1, the table on the bottom right, is that something that Colliers developed, or is that something that's appraisal, like that you'd get from like the Appraisal Institute?
This was 2 divisions of Colliers did it, and it's in it follows the Appraisal Institute's guidelines. The Appraisal Institute has all of these factors in it. I've got my handy little textbook here. They're all in there. And what the Appraisal Division did is they put the 23 items as on a typical appraisal. They'll go through them. The weighting on it then is got to be specific to the market, and so that's a Winnipeg market view of what's the most important factor on it. But it's I can give you the chapter on it. This is all capitalization rates. Chapter 20 in this book are the factors that were looked at. I don't know if you have the textbook, but
it's at the office. I'm in my kitchen right now.
Okay,
but I'll move along. The building size at this price point, do you ever see a correlation with buildings of this kind of like smaller size and this smaller selling price with lower caps, given there's a greater pool, including like the mom and pop investors that can get in on the bidding on the property? You ever see that?
As I mentioned earlier, what you have to do is determine if the sale was an actual investment sale, because there are standards to follow in investment sales, and that's where it's based solely on the income, not external motivation. You mentioned the mom and pop type, and it's very typical to find that one of the units gets occupied by the owner. This particular company has bought several of those where the owner had a suite and sold out, and they got these smaller units. where you'll see the rate reflected the way I'm showing it here will usually be if there's a portfolio sale where there's a mix of different sizes of properties and the desire is to sell it as one, and it will impact the cap rate that way. But the mom and pop concept is not an investment sale. So it's not one, if you're going to use that approach, you have to switch to the direct comparison approach, not the income approach, and then that skews the equity issue. But we get a fair amount of requests for these appraisals, and the incomes rarely support on the smaller units. And the honest truth here is, I offered to buy one of their fourplexes at the cap rate on their normal income, and I needed a place for my mother and my sister, and they said, yeah, no, we're not selling that to you. but that's its value as an investment, and that's aligning with the theory that the assessment department is applied in the income approach as well as appraisers.
Okay, so just so to be clear, I understand, you're saying that because it's smaller, it's likely that someone would buy it to live in there, and therefore it's not a good.
Well, yeah,
and
there's a municipal board on that, by the way, you can look up. It's on 225 McKay, which was a fourplex. And in that, the decision, the board said that with these smaller units, we're going to go with direct comparison, no longer income. So when you cross the line on the method, yeah, you're picking up value because it's the motivation. In this particular case, the owner doesn't live in this building, and it's part of a 100 apartment block portfolio, and this is the contribution to it. This is its investment value. You know, you go through every unit on that basis and try to determine that, and you are no longer applying the income approach.
Anything else, Marcus?
On that, no, I have some more questions. Just on your valuation, revised value of 410, that comes out to 51,250 a unit on Corden. Does that seem low to you based on the desirability of the neighborhood?
As I said, this is a reflection of a very high maintenance cost, repair and maintenance costs, because of the smaller number of units, and it's a reflection of the correct application of the income approach. That's how it is. I'm true to the theory, and I don't disagree that sometimes these buildings end up selling for more, but then you and I should be debating the direct comparison approach, not the income approach.
Anything else, Marcus?
Yeah, a couple questions. This will be my cap questions for all, so we'll get out of here before 5. On page 32, if we could head down there. Just in regards to the cap rate on the top, it says the cap rate is the property's net operating income for the 12 months following the date of sale divided by the purchase price. So just to be clear, these cap rates were not calculated using, your range was not calculated using financials that would have been available during the time the sale price would have been negotiated for the respective sales used in the report. Is that correct?
The application in the appraisal world, and I think the language isn't quite correct. When a sale occurs, there's a calculation of the cap rate. They look at the historical performance, and in Manitoba, they will take into account what the RTB will allow for next year, because that's the purchaser's decision, that he knows there's a small bump, And when they talk about next year, what they're talking about is essentially stabilization, not future income, because it's a different way of phrasing it. All of our cap rates are at time of sale. This is what the vendor, this is what the vendor is putting forward, and this is what the purchaser believes. And in a cap rate, it's the decision date. So the ones I provide you as an examples are decision date.
Okay.
I don't think that the brokers understand the stabilization wording. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brockis.
Okay, and then just, sorry, last questions here, just your examples, page 35 and 36. Those ones, the deals didn't actually go through prior to our reference date. Would that be a correct statement?
They didn't clear titles. And the dates that you look at are the decision date, the date that meeting of the minds. And I've been searching through board decisions to talk about what's the right date to use, and there's no direction either way. The Appraisal Institute calls the meeting of the minds as the appropriate date, because in many locations it may take weeks and months to clear titles, and it doesn't reflect the market. So, and just a quick answer to this is, if you made a deal on 2 months before the rate went up, but then it closed title after the rate went up, they agreed on it based on lower rates. So that's why it's so important in the market, in a quickly changing market. So for these, we actually have the documents for the deals.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, any questions of the applicant?
I think all my questions have been answered, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Mon, any questions of the applicant?
I do, just, and this question and answer can apply to all 7 properties. But my question in summary, I guess, Mr. Neufeld, your submission to us, or your evidence to us, is that the Collier's calculation for cap rates is preferable to the chart that the city has presented to us. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you had characterized this property as a lower end. Would that be safe to say this is a mid-range or lower end product?
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm just pointing out to you that the page 16 of your report indicates that the capitalization rates noted are for premium sites and do not reflect mid-range or lower products. But you're asking us to apply those rates to the mid-range or lower product. Is that correct?
I think that's a language issue, not a practical issue. All market participants report only the premium product, and this is an inferior product. Now, the split when you get from a modern high-rise to a 3-story walk-up, all things being, as long as they're in good condition, is going to be tighter. So on the Collier's cap rate page, we had a range of 5.5 to 6.5. What we're trying to say is that's not a 5.5, it's a 6.5, and that's the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mon. Mr. Neufeld, to summarize, you're making a verbal request to revise the NOI on the subject property to 26,441, using a capitalization rate of 6.5% equals an estimated value of 406,784, rounded $407,000.
Well, I had said 410, but 407. I was rounding because of the process I used, which was a lot of estimation. I would like to be in. I don't want to split hairs on and do any sharp practice. That's
okay. Thank you. Excuse me. I think we've covered everything. I'm not sure if anybody requires a summary, but we do have an extensive presentation by both parties, so would it be fair to conclude item number 1?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I was gonna hold any comments to the end unless there's something specific to the property. Yes.
Thank you. That concludes item number 1. Next item on the docket is item number 2, file number 24-4358, address 507 Corden Avenue, dealing with the 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Baracus, when you are ready, please.
All right, thank you. Roll number 12021554000 507 Corden. 767,000. It's the sister property, the property we discussed, right next door. It's got again the same, virtually identical, other than the address for the purpose of this exercise. The workup is on page 3. My presentation to support the city's model valuation would be the same. Pictures are found on page 9 of the other one. Pardon me. And then the mailer here on page 10. For whatever reason, we did have a separate mailer for 507, whereas the 503 was combined. So, I mean, given we just had an extensive conversation of 503 and the valuation and issues are the same, I'll just leave my presentation right there. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to the assessor. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the evidence presented? Mr. Neufeld, you are on mute.
If we're assuming that our previous discussion should refer to this one, then I have no new questions.
Thank you. Mr. Mon, any questions of the assessor?
No, thank you. No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions either. Mr. Neufeld, are you presenting rebuttal evidence?
It's the same rebuttal as previously presented.
Okay, and we have that on record, Mrs. Harland?
Yes.
Okay, so we will consider that rebuttal presented. Mr. Neufeld, when you are ready, please.
If it's okay with the board, we know new information we brought forward. We're assuming what was said before relates to this property as well as the correction of what I see to be an error, and to alter the NOI to 26441 at a 6.5% cap rate, 406,784 rounded to 410,000.
Thank you. Mr. Baracus, any questions of the applicant?
Just ask that my questions from last property be applied to this one, so I don't have any new ones. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I apologize here. I noted, this to be very brief, that the evidence differed slightly on page 39. And this is a breakdown of classification of apartments, and our Class A is represented by, this is the new tower at 360 Main. That's a Class A. Class B is, these are the holiday towers. They're dated, downtown high rise. Our Class C is a 3-story walk-up with a fairly large one, and this is on Hargrave. And our class, our D is a smaller 3-story walk-up, again in the district. And our miscellaneous is this building is 239 Colony, and it's a great example of miscellaneous lowest class because it's still using steam heat and lots and lots of costs. Just an indication of that there are different grades of apartment to an investor. Sorry, I missed adding that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Borkus, any questioning on that?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Mon, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, just to confirm, you're making a verbal request to revise the net operating income to 26,441, capitalized at 6.5% with a requested adjusted value of $410,000.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Either party have any requirement for summary?
I do not.
No,
Neufeld?
no.
Thank you. That concludes 507 Corridor Avenue. Next item on the docket is item number 3, file number 24-4293, address 1218 Avenue. When you're ready, Raucus.
Thank you very much. Roll number 1203102600, 1218 Gordon, $400,000 assessed value. It's like basically Gordon and Thurso, a 1964, no effective year built on it. 4 suites, 4 outdoor parking spots. So page 2, no recent sales, good mailers submitted to us. Good mailer history. Page 3 shows the income value summary. It's 4 1-bedrooms. Average monthly rent per unit is $843.03 with a 4 3/4 cap, 51.44 expense ratio. Comes out to $400,000. Which is $100,000 per unit. So we got the rent comparables on the 4th page here. Then we have the cap rate sales on page 5. You can see that the rent comparables were falling again a bit below the range. The effective year builds of the comparables range from 55 to 72. Pardon me. I don't think we're too far off from each other on an effective gross income basis. I'm not going to really dwell on it unless something's changed, of course. Again, the same cap rate sales I presented previously are on page 5, along with the table with the cap rate 20th to 80th percentile ranges. And then on page 8, it shows, pardon me, the overhead picture of the property. Sorry, MLL. Page 9 shows the exterior photograph as per Google Street View imagery. And then we have the, on page 10, we've got the mailers. So again, we have a pretty high expense ratio on this one and vacancy rate. Now, I don't know if looking at, page 11, it says their potential income just on a suite basis is $49,800. It says they collected $38,362. So, I mean, that's a pretty high vacancy rate. It's like 23% missing from their total potential. So I'm not quite sure. That's like abnormal for sure. And when we're looking at the maintenance and repair at 13,000 over 4 units, that's 3,400 a unit. So again, that's much higher than we typically see as well. So the rest of my brief just shows some more of the historical mailers. I just went with the model on this one. Because it's got like abnormally high reported vacancy, and it's also got higher than typical R&M as well. So when I looked at it, looping back to page 3, we're at 100,000 per unit for 4 1-bedrooms on Corden. It doesn't seem like a lot in terms of just like the desirability of the area. So I didn't make a change to this property. I just left it with the model. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, any questions?
Yeah, is it your understanding that the information presented on page 11 are the actual asking rates?
Well, it says like suite rental income. It seems like that's what they're reporting as their gross potential. But they also said gross on page 10, but there's a big difference there. So the way I read it is 11 reads as their potential, and then 10 reads as what they actually received. Even though they checked off gross, I probably think they meant net, but I can't be 100% certain.
I'm sorry, I thought we went through this before. You understood what they were reporting. And maybe it wasn't you, I think it was everybody else who's, have you ever handled this property before?
Probably.
Okay, I'll get to it, but it's the RTB registration that they put there. That's not their on it, because I was going to ask you if you can read the sign on your page 9.
On page 9. Oh. It says, oh, zooming in there, yeah, it says no vacancy at the time this picture was taken.
That's a permanent sign, by the way. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And the other question for you was you've put in 3 years of statements, 20 to 22.
Yep.
The NOI has never surpassed $13,471, correct?
Based on this 3-year period, on what they're reporting, that would be correct, yes.
And isn't 3 years a fairly reliable indicator that you weed out the high expenses years and problems?
Yeah, I mean, like the longer the time horizon you look at, the more data you have to like stabilize and normalize and kind of like pull out outliers.
Sure. So, but you've got 19,000 as your NOI, and in that 3-year period, the highest they've ever done is 13,000. Then, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Those are my only. The rest of our discussion from earlier assumed asked, answered, and as part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mon, any questions of the assessor?
Just one for clarification geographically. Where I was looking at your map, I was looking for a cross street and I couldn't find it. What is the cross street, or whereabout on Corden is this?
So it's basically like Corden and Thurso.
Okay.
So we've got actually 2 other properties like right there as well. So we're kind of in that area.
Okay, thank you. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan?
Just a question here on page 4. When it comes to your subject property versus your comparables here, you have the construction classes, wood or steel stud, and your comparables are all masonry, bearing walls. What's the difference, and why would your comparables be different?
Oh, I mean, I was just looking at the average monthly rent per unit in regards. I don't know how much it really weighs into a potential tenant's mind what the building is constructed by. At least I know when I was younger and I was looking for apartments, I suppose masonry might be a bit more soundproof, but I was just looking at the average monthly rents per unit strictly on that basis. I think the applicant and myself are pretty close unless something's changed. So I don't think the income is, at least component wise of this valuation, we're not too far off.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Seelan, I have no questions. Mr. Neufeld, do you have the rebuttal for this property?
It's the same as previously presented. May I assume it's been presented and have it concluded?
Ms. Harlan, we have that rebuttal on record for this property?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So we'll consider that presented and into evidence. Mr. Neufeld, when you are ready, please.
Yes, and I'm gonna backtrack a bit here because we had this discussion about, you know, a smaller unit, and it would appeal to someone who's got less to invest and they might pay more, and the cap rate issue. Just bear in mind that we're looking at complexes today. So 503, 507 was a complex of two. It is separately titled, but would not be marketed separately. So again, we're not talking about a smaller operation. This particular one is part of an economic unit with the two other properties that we're going to hear later today on Thurso. One's the neighbor, one's across the street. So this is they're operated, and on that basis, they would be considered for sale together. The issue the assessor brought up about he was musing about the vacancy rate. No, this building really doesn't have any vacancy problems at all. When they fill out the forms, they go to the residential tenancies branch registration. So that office, every single apartment block in the city has a rate that beside it, and that's the maximum you can charge on it. But you don't have to charge on it. So this company has been renting apartments in Winnipeg for 110 years. I think they know the market better than me. They know the market better than the assessor. They go out, make sure the registrations are redone every year to the max, but they charge their tenants rent and drop their leases based on market. And this place is always full. So this is a rent as full. What is different about it is just the higher cost to maintain, because in another principle to consider is we have 3 units here, and with expenses, but we also have 3 sets of building envelopes and everything that comes with that to maintain. 3 sets of parking lots, 3 sets of doors, 3 sets of hallways, and that's what I was getting at is the way that these units are configured into smaller pieces, but economically they're always considered together. Now in this case, the statements they were able to divide better because historically they have run these separately. There's no joint statement, but as you can see from the evidence, it's you know, the bad years $4,800, a good year is $13,000. There's nothing in there that that is unremarkable. They haven't factored in capital expenses in here for maintenance. It's just the cost of running a block professionally. None of these blocks are run down. None of these are for social assistance where the landlord won't spend a nickel on it. They spend the money as they're required to provide good quality accommodations, and that's the return they're getting. We've averaged it to to 12,517, which, if you look at the 3 years there, is a fair number. My only comment here is I'm not 100% convinced that 7.05% represents an achievable cap rate. I hark back to what I said earlier today, is that our best rates, the best buildings, 5.5, and from there it just goes up. So this would be at the other side of the range, probably 6.5. And I think that's a more appropriate number to put on here. And that comes to a value of 192,569, rounded to 193,000. Anything else I would say today is repetitive, and I'm going to assume we've had those discussions and we can move on. But we did put the classes on the end of here as kind of a guideline of where it falls in on a declining basis, and that's page 39. Starting with the top end of the range and going down. So this one would be more of a Class D, which is a smaller 3-story walk-up building, and but not a miscellaneous one. This portfolio actually has some miscellaneous ones, some very bad properties, and we would save our worst rates for them, but it should fit in the Collier's range at the high end at 6.5. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Baracus, any questions of the applicant?
Just a couple. Have you inspected this property?
Yeah, I've been in it. Yeah, I've inspected it. I can't tell you exactly when. I've been in every one of these buildings at some point between 2008 and today.
Okay. And at the time, if you can remember when you inspected it, were there any renovations of note?
No. What I noted on these properties, and the Corridon ones in specific, is that the owner had a very hardy program of renovation. As a unit became vacant, they spent a lot more money than most people would do on turnover. And this is an expense, not a renovation. You don't get more money for it from RTB. And what that would include is complete flooring replacement, complete decoration, generally cabinet replacement, and a review of all fixtures and replacing anything that's older than, I think, 5 years old is what they go at. And so that turnover runs them probably around 5,000 every time they do a turnover, and it's not, that is an expense. They spend the money. A lot of units don't, and that's, I think, what we're looking at, is they keep it up to a good state of repair.
Okay.
There was on this one of the buildings, Thurso or Corridon, had a new roof done about 10 years ago. I do recall that, but I can't tell you if it was this one or not.
Okay. And then I just asked the panel consider my previous questions in regards to the applicant's cap rate for this property as well. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Noted for the record. Mr. Seelan, any questions of the applicant?
Yes, so your cap rate has changed and it's 6.5% now?
Yes, this, I'm reflecting my own opinion here. I did not prepare the details of this, and I think it's appropriate if I see something to point it out to you, especially if it's moves the value higher. That's correct.
What is your new market value?
193,000 rounded.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Seelan. Mr. Mon, any questions of the applicant?
No, I don't think so. Thank you. No questions, Mr. Chair.
And I have no questions either, for the record, Mr. Neufeld. Your NOI is 12,517, and you're making a verbal request to revise the cap rate to 6.5%, equals a verbal request for an estimated market value of $103,000.
Yeah, part of your transmission broke up. I heard 1 and 3, so 193, yes.
193, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any requirement for summary by either party?
I'm okay. Maybe just a 5-minute break after this one.
I was gonna do, okay, yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, okay. Mr. Neufeld, any requirement for summary?
General comments at the end, defer to that if that's okay.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. That concludes item number 3, 1218 Corydon Avenue. We will take a 7-minute break, recess for 7 minutes, Mrs. Harland. Thank you, Mrs. Harlan. I will now call the hearing back in session. The next item on the docket is item number 4, file number 24-4270. Address is 211 Thurso Street. We're dealing with a 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Baracus, when you're ready, please.
All right, thank you. Roll number 12031547000, 211 Thurso. 532,000 on the assessed value in 1949. Effective year built, no effective. That's the actual no effective year built on it. 4 suites, 4 outdoor parking spots. Page 3 shows the income and expenses. Rather the income value summary. So we've got 4 2-bedroom units, average monthly rent at $1,085.63 as per the model. 4.8 cap with a 49.35 expense rate. That comes out to 532 or 133 per unit. Pulled some comparables here. They're comprised of 1 and 2 bedrooms. You can see that the average monthly rent that the model has selected for this property, $1,085. It's just below the range there. And these comps, they also do. They do have 1-bedroom units, which would be a factor as well. Then on page 5, what we have is that we have the same cap rate sales as before in previous files. One moment. Over here. Okay. And then on page 6, we have just the cap rate range table as automatically generated in our briefs. Page 7, it shows municipal act excerpts, and then on page 8, again, we're in the same area like Thurso and Corydon. This one's across the street from the last one. So you can see the picture of the outside of it on page 9. You see the income and expense mailer as well here, beginning on page 10 of the property. So with this one as well, just went with the model. I had the same kind of questions, and this is going to be the thread of this day today, is that there's higher than normal vacancy. If you read it as page 11 is what they are, is their reported potential, while page 10 is what they got. And again, I don't know if, like the applicant stated previously, this is they're registered at the RTB, and then they make discounts. It just wasn't clear. It just said gross potential suite income at 100% occupancy, their potential. I'm reading it as almost 70,000. Looking at this one, it's got about a 30% vacancy. If you read it as such, that's what they can actually collect, is 66.23% expense ratio, which is higher than what we typically see, unless the place is run down or there's issues with it. So again, I just went with the model on this one. That's my evidence.
Thank you to the assessor. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
Yes, same question, but different property. Your picture, page 9, can you zoom in and read that sign?
Page 9. Where is the sign? Sorry.
It's behind the trees, I think. Let me just, sorry, I'm looking at it in a different, oh, you know what? I'm looking at it from the side street, from the other view. Because this is a corner lot. It says no vacancy. It's the same sign as we just looked at for 1218 Corridon. The permanent sign that says no vacancy.
This is on my page 9.
You know what? No, I apologize. Your angle, you shot this on, looks to me like it was the Thurso side.
It's hidden behind the bushes.
Yeah, it could be behind the bushes. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Okay. Maybe you got a better picture in your brief. I don't know. I just can't read. I
No,
got bad eyes to begin with, so
I'm
can't
looking
see.
at Google Earth.
Okay.
Okay, and again, the same question I had asked earlier is disregarding the year of 21, where they had a very high maintenance repair cost. The net income was 13.2 and 17.6, and yet you're applying 25.5.
Yeah, that's true. Based on what they're reporting, that's a fact.
Yeah, so it's sort of a variation on the question of why do you bother with income and expense forms to ask people what they're making when it never comes into effect?
Well, I wouldn't say it never comes into effect. We ask for income and expenses because the model just doesn't take what they're reporting to us and then apply that as their net operating income. The model gets the expense ratio and the rents from income and expense statements submitted to the city of Winnipeg by properties of similar physical characteristics, year built, size, and they look in the neighborhood. So it's kind of like those rates are determined by the market. So it's not just this one. Now, this one, it seems like it's reporting as an anomaly in regards to like its expense ratio being like 66%. I wouldn't mind like walking through this place to see if there's if I can physically see if it's like in poor condition why their expenses are running so high. It just seems like an outlier. So without an inspection or anything like that, I just went with the model. But I understand where your comments are coming from.
Well, you called it an outlier. This is Smith Agency. How many apartment blocks do you think they own on Corridon? Probably half of them, right?
Well,
none of them have a variance. Why would you consider them to be outliers when they're all the same?
The Smith Agency?
Everyone we've heard today is a Smith Agency ownership. Now, they own 100 blocks, most of them in that whole area in Corridon. We're going to have the same debate on all of them about the expense level. I'm asking you, why would you say that the major operator of these apartment blocks is an anomaly when they have a super high statistical base. That's the
Well, what I'm saying is typically we're not seeing for like properties of this size, like an expense ratio of 66% typically indicates that there's something requiring more money on a yearly basis, maybe a physical issue. Like in my experience, it doesn't, like they usually land between 50 and 60, maybe, in the mid 40s if they're a bit newer or, they've been renovated. So it just seems to me like this expense ratio is abnormally high based on my experience looking through income and expense mailers.
for 100 units, it's too high, but that's what you're trying to say.
Well, no, I'm just talking about 211 Thurso at the moment. I mean, there's going to be other properties we're going to talk about, and this is the theme. This is going to be like the theme of the day, like I mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. I'm just bringing it up. That's all.
No, for sure.
I think we've covered all the other ground, and the board will hopefully consent to considering our earlier conversation to be part of this property as well.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, any questions of the assessor?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Mon, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Barkis, I'd just like you expand a little bit, please, on something that you indicated about the model. This is a modeled expense rate, the 49.35%.
Yes.
Okay, and you'd indicated that the expense rate is derived from the income and expense mailers, dealing with or grouping together into neighborhood sizes of the building, things like that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. My understanding of the model is that it looks at the entire pool of physically similar buildings, and I'm not even sure if now that I think about it, if neighborhood would be as much of a factor, because based on the year and the condition, it's going to deteriorate at a certain level. Whether it's in St. James or St. Vital, is it really going to deteriorate at a higher level? So I'm not a modeler. I can't say for certain if the area, unless it's, maybe a tougher area, where that might be something that is weighed more heavily. But going back to it, circling back, the expense ratio would be derived by the model by looking at taking into account the reported expenses of others physically similar buildings, and then applying that to the subject property.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further.
Thank you, Mr. Mon. And I have no questions either. Mr. Neufeld, you have rebuttal evidence submitted on this property also?
That is correct, and the same issue. If we can just add that to the record, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Harland, to confirm Mr. Neufeld's rebuttal is recorded as being. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Mr. Neufeld, when you are ready, please.
Okay, 211 Thurso is again, it's part of the same complex of the Corridon property we just heard and the next Thurso property we're going to hear. They're all one operating unit. They all have separate titles, and on our page 1, we have the recap of the operations, and you can see that in 2020 expenses were very, very high. And earlier I was saying one of these buildings had the roof replaced. Yeah, that was this one. So that was the 2020 cost, and we're not relying on that at all. We're looking at the expenses from the 21 and 22, which stabilized at $32,000 for the site, for a stabilized earnings of $16,398, which is very strongly supported by the actual performance. There are no vacancies. Again, well, one of the interesting things is the assessor says, well, you've got these rates here, these posted rates. Well, we don't have a vacancy problem in these buildings. So they're rarely offered for lease. So there's no real published rates of asking on them, which is why they put it in the RTB guideline. And that's what is the potential rent. They could get that rent if the market was willing to pay it. The market is not willing to pay that much in income, and therefore the income as full is best indicated by the returns on. Sorry, I had two screens open. I'm reading the wrong one here. Are best represented by the statement that they provided for 2022 as full is $48,554. And the other issue having to do with the cap rate, again, I'm inclined to think that it would be 6.5. Our range is 5.5 to 6.5, and it's at the higher cap rate end of the range because it's not a modern high rise, and that accounts for all the factors on the property. It would be marketed as part of the larger complex of Thurso and 1218 Gordon. So it would just revise this number to the 6.5 rate. And again, apologize. I mean, when like the assessment department, when you have people helping do prepare briefs, they're not always understanding the market, and they're working in the abstract, and which is why I feel it's appropriate to make changes like this. At 6.5%, it's $252,277, rounded to 255,000. And that's my presentation, assuming all the other material is heard earlier is taken into account.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Baracus, any questions of the applicant's evidence?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mon, any questions of the applicant?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
For the record, Mr. Neufeld, verbal request to revise the use the existing 16398 NOI, but a request to revise the cap rate utilized to 6.5%, resulting in a rounded value of $255,000 as estimated market value.
Correct.
Thank you. And Mr. Neufeld, my only question is, are we seeing on your page, page 1, are we seeing actual revenue in that revenue column, or is that are you refer? I think
No, that's the actual earned income as full.
Okay, but
that's the cash, yes.
That is the cash. Okay,
and there is no vacancy in that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, that's my only questions. Any requirement for summary by either party?
I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Neufeld?
I just realized something. We have one more Smith property to do. Are we doing the next Thurso one after this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll probably summarize the Smith position later, because after that, the rest are somebody else's.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That concludes item number 4, 211 Thurso. Next item on the docket is item number 5, and we're addressed at 223 Thurso.
Okay.
The file number is 24-4271, and we're dealing with the 2025 Realty Appeal. Mr. Baracus, when you're ready.
Okay, roll number 120310240000, 223 Thurso. Assessed value 696,1953. No effective age. 8 suites, 4 outdoor parking spots. Page 3 shows the income value summary. 4 bachelor, 4 1-bedroom, $842.49 on the average monthly rent as per the model. With our modeled vacancy rate and expense ratio on a 4.85 cap, comes out to about 87,000 a suite. Rent comparables are on page 4. So they range from 862 to 950. We're at 842. They're a mix of predominantly bachelor and 1-bedroom units, which our subject property is as well. And then we have our cap rate charts, pardon me, on page 5 and 6. And you can see we're still in this little corner here of Thurso and Corden. They're on page 8, and then you have the outside of the property on page 9 as well. And then we have the mailer. So like the last property, I went with the model on this one. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baracus. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor's evidence?
Yeah, the same as before. You've got 3 years of statements and a range of NOI from 16,000 to 33,000. And you've went to the high end of the range. Would not some stabilization be indicated?
In terms of the actuals,
Yeah.
yeah. So again, with this one, there's just there wasn't clarity in regards to, at least in my mind, what their reporting their potential was, and then they had higher vacancy, but like admittedly less than the other properties was displaying. This one's about 11%. Or sorry, I've lost my place here. Yeah, 66% expenses and 11% vacancy. That's a lot higher than we see. So I just went with the model on this one. It just seems like it's. I know it's not. It's not within the ranges we typically see. I'd like to probably do an inspection of these places to kind of like get a better idea of what's going on.
Okay, that's I assume we've covered all the other ground earlier. No other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Mon, any questions of the assessor?
No, I don't think so. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Seelan.
Just a question. Do you know when these were last inspected by the city?
I do not. But I think they'll probably be inspected soon. I think there might be some municipal board file in regards to these 2 properties at least. So no, I do not. I don't know when they were last inspected, so I should.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Seelan, and I have no questions of the assessor. Mr. Neufeld, I assume we have rebuttal evidence submitted?
Yes, exactly, same as before.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Harlan, can we confirm that rebuttal is on record?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready, 223 Thurso Street.
Yes, thank you. Now, I've got to give you the good news here. I'm not making any changes. I'm going to point out to an error I spotted here on page 1, where we have the 3-year summary. Again, this is as full, no vacancies in here. The expense number was and the NOI number are in the wrong category. And you can check the assessor's page. You can see where the error happened. The assessor's page 13, which would actually indicate on an average basis a lower NOI. But on the other hand, that one expense, the expenses appear to need some stabilization. So rather than revert the number downwards, I'm just going to leave it. So it is a correction would indicate a lower value, which we're not going to correct it. And this was applied at 6.5%, which is what I think is reasonable. So the number stands at 376,000. Oh no, yeah, they just rang our stupid fire bell. I don't know what's going to happen. I think they're going to make us go out. Or it could be a test. So that's my presentation.
Would you like to check?
No, they're going to come in with a fire warden and kick me out. So I always wait for that.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Baracus, any questions of the applicant?
I do not.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, any questions of the applicant?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
You're trying to beat the bell here.
Yeah.
Mr. Mann, any questions of the applicant?
No, I'll join in and say no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I have no questions either. Excuse me. Any requirement for summary, Mr. Baracus?
I do not.
And I believe, Mr. Newman, you wanted to summarize?
Yeah, I did. The ones we've heard up to today are the ones all owned by Smith Agency, and they own over 100 apartment blocks all across the city, with a greater density on Corridon. And their statements will all read like this. And the assessor's saying, well, these numbers don't look right. And what's his word, lack of clarity? I'm not picking on him, but I think what we're dealing with here is just a different way of management. Smith are not slum landlords. They keep their buildings in very good condition, and they have high marks from their tenants, and they set the market. They've been doing it for 110 years, not the rest of us. These numbers are real. And the warden just went by, so I'm about to get the boot. I'll be back, I guess. I don't know what to say.
Okay. Okay.
Normally I would go to the Elephant and Castle and have a drink while this is going on, so maybe I'll have a good time.
Okay, Mrs. Harlan, can you keep in touch with Mr. Newfed whether he can return or not? And we're going to have to recess.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just heard from my manager and we can take a recess.
Yes, okay, perfect.
And I'll just go get us offline now. Just a moment,
Okay.
please.
Okay,
Right.
we're going to recess until the applicant is available to continue with the remaining properties if possible. Thank you, Mrs. Harland. Next item on the docket is item number 6, 1134 Notre Dame Avenue, file number 24-3967. Mr. Baracus, when you're ready, please.
Okay, thank you. One moment, just let me pull this up. $1134 Notre Dame.
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, so file number 24-3967, roll number 13012582000, 1134 Notre Dame Avenue, assessed value $751,000. Built in 52, no effective year built. 10 suites, 6 outdoor parking spots, Going down to page 2, you see for requests for income information, mostly been submitting it no problem. It says there's a subject sale back in 2008. That's so long ago, I wouldn't consider too relevant for the current climate we're looking at. Income value summary of 4 bachelor, 5 1-bedroom, 1 2-bedroom, 10 units total, 710 on the average monthly rent. We got 82,000 on the effective gross income. One moment. I'm not too far off the applicant in that regard. 53.86% expense ratio, 5.05 cap. Gets to a rounded value of 751, which is about 75,000 per unit. Got our rent comparables here on page 4, but like I mentioned before, we're pretty close. We're within $2,000 on the. Actually, we're closer than that in terms of the income. So I'm not going to really go into depth here on the income side of the coin. But we fall within the range of the average monthly rent per unit of the comparables on Notre Dame. 5 and 6 are the cap rate charts we've discussed. And then we've got the picture of the aerial on page 8. And then on page 9 shows the outside, as well as page 10. Found some photographs online of the interior of the units, just so the panel can ascertain the condition. I know the pictures, they don't look great in terms of the quality, but this is, again, the best I could find. Pardon me. Page 15 is the income and expense mailers. One thing I did notice looking at these income and expense mailers, I mean, there's a few things. Like when you look at what was listed, declared by the person the manager, I guess, of the property, like all the numbers, they're like perfectly round. And that's, I mean, that's not what we typically see. Like typically they're not perfectly round to the 100 or 1,000. So it leads me to believe that they either rounded or these aren't the actual numbers, but I'm not sure. I'm not accusing or saying anything. I'm just saying that from my experience looking through mailers, that given that they're perfectly round, it's kind of hard to put my weight on them. They're reporting an expense ratio. If you took the 60,000, actually, sorry, 60,000 flat, and you remove the 4,000 interest, you get 56,000 expenses. And if you just divide that by 8,400, it's coming out to 67%, which again is way higher than we typically see. That coupled with the fact that, I mean, they're submitting these perfectly round numbers. I just went with the model. That's my evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Brockis. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor's evidence?
Yes. The perfectly round numbers, is there something in the act that says you can't use a rounded number?
Well, I don't believe the act mentions rounding your expenses up or down.
Don't we round our values off?
Yeah, but when you're looking at the income and expenses, like surely these aren't the actual, they didn't get they probably didn't get a hydro bill of exactly 8,600, maybe they did, but it just seems weird to me that every single number is rounded to 100, or like, I don't know. It seems off to me.
Well, sorry, but it seems off, and your opinion on it. What did you bring facts forward to dispute these numbers?
Well, I mean, in my experience,
Miss-
the income and expenses aren't like, you know,
Yes or no is fine. All I need.
Yes or no, please.
nothing in the contents of my brief.
And on these on the actual income, again, the same notice as before. I think I agree with you on the interest exclusion, of course, but it appears to me that they've never declared more than $31,000 net income for any year, and your valuation applies 37.9, so almost $7,000 higher. Um, any reason we should, other than what you on the rounding issue, any other issues with the actuals?
Well, just, I mean, these are all perfectly round numbers. I don't know how much weight I can put on them. That would be my only real
All right.
gripe. And yeah.
You have pictures in here.
Mhm.
Where did these come from? There's arrows in the side. I'm assuming these came off an internet listing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would have been, when I look at these properties, I always try to like Google and find out what the physical is. So we're capturing the physical January 1st, 2025, which is what we're looking at. So it would have been from the internet, I believe.
Was there a remark there about being recently remodeled?
I don't know. It's not in my brief. I can't remember, to be honest.
Okay, but from the pictures, these are obviously newer windows we're looking at, and an ephes covering, and newer cabinets. Looks like the Home Depot special.
It's not original to 1952, that's for sure. Those
Okay,
pictures.
all right. Those are my only questions then. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Mon, any questions of the assessor?
Just one with respect to inspection. Has this been inspected, or is it likely to be inspected during this cycle? Or
I mean, probably not. Like, we don't just like randomly inspect properties, like unless there's like an inquiry or a request to inspect, or there's like a permit, or like there's a real noted discrepancy. So the answer is no.
okay, thank you. I don't have anything further.
Thank you, Mr. Mon. Mr. Seelan, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I have no questions either. Mr. Neufeld, do you have rebuttal evidence for this property?
As presented earlier, and a repeat, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Harlan, please confirm that Mr. Neufeld's rebuttal is in evidence submitted.
Yes, it is. Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Mr. Neufeld, when you are ready, please. 1134 Notre Dame Avenue.
Yeah, so on our page 1, we have the 3 years of performance, and we did remove the interest factor in it. As regard to the rounding, I don't know. I've never heard of that being used as a something to indicate a different value. I can tell you that it's not reasons of any sort that we should be concerned of. It's I believe it's a language barrier issue, but numbers are the same in all languages. These are valid numbers, and the rounding, if anything, would only indicate a difference of a couple of percentage points in value, so it's of no consequence. As with the others, I think that this goes to the upper range of the value of the cap rates, which we would peg at 6.5%. So make a small adjustment there. if I could. To 476,876, rounded to 480,000 at a 6.5% cap. I would note that the previous year, the owner actually missed the appeal, didn't respond in enough time. So whatever it was from the prior years was just missed. The unit was had a, I guess you want to call it a minor renovation, and you can see that from the pictures that the windows have been done and the outside of it's been done. Sorry, I was said ephes. I'm going to say no. That's probably an acrylic paint covering on it. With the units being improved from their prior condition, but when you look at the statements provided, there's nothing that stands out on the income and the repairs and maintenance that would suggest that any sort of major repair was amortized into this. When they're indicating 1 year is 1,600 a door, next year is 1,300 a door, and the other year is 930 a door. And this is pretty much on par, with what you would expect, somewhere in the $1,200 to $1,400 range for most units for repairs and maintenance. Nothing stands out on this. One of the issues, if you look at the statements, and I hadn't mentioned this in the earlier appeals, but it's the same issue. All the buildings we've seen so far, the utilities are included in the rent. So that's why the costs are higher. And when the city does a ratio of expenses, if it's mixed with units where the utilities have been offset to the tenant, of course it's going to skew these rates out. For a building that pays full utilities included in the rent, this expense ratio is appropriate. And that's my presentation, along with everything else you've heard today.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Walkus, any questions of the applicant?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mon, any questions?
Just one with respect to, or just a series with respect to the expenses. The only alteration you've made with respect to the expenses reported on your table is with respect to the interest component that's been removed?
Yeah, I'm just, I can double check that, but I was glancing through it. For example, 22, they're saying 23.4, but 4,000 in interest, and we used 27.4. So that's, yeah, I think we just pull the interest out.
Okay, so you're just relying on what they've put in their income and expense mailer, or is there a separate audit function that you perform?
On this, for these properties, no, because generally what this one, for example, in past years, they have been sending me their copies of their returns to CRA. So I have some degree of confidence in them. The ones we've heard earlier today, of course, are audited by an accounting firm. I think there's a high degree of reliability on these.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mon. Mr. Seelan, any questions of the applicant?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, can you explain the location of this?
Yeah, it's on Notre Dame. It's going to be somewhere around the intersection of where McPhillips runs into Notre Dame. I'm just trying to remember where it was off 1134. Yeah, at the corner of Notre Dame and McPhillips is 1111. So it's just going to be a bit northwest of that.
Okay, so it's towards the school.
Yeah, towards Tech Walk. Yeah.
All right. Okay, perfect. Okay, That's my only question. Thank you. Um, any requirement for party?
Nope.
Just a little one for me. During the presentation, and I just thought of this, I did touch on the fact that there was a sale in 2008 for 455,000. We're at 751. The applicant's asking for a value that's right around the 2008 value. I know the real estate market's changed quite a bit since then. And in my comments, I said I wouldn't consider this value something as relevant to current economic climate, but knowing how the value of real estate has progressed, it doesn't make sense that the current valuation should be around what it sold for in 2008.
Okay,
That's
thank
my
you.
summation.
Mr. Neufeld?
Well, I just want to respond to that. Yeah, I have this joke I used to say, or this way of addressing comments like that, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I call it coffee shop appraisal. That's not valuation. You know, prices go up and down in the market. We've had such a prolonged good time period that when they finally drop, no one's recognizing it. And perhaps it's an emotional issue on our part. We don't want to recognize it because it means all of our assets have depreciated, but it happened. And that's why we reassess every 2 years. It's something that most people who haven't been in this business long enough have never seen. Me personally, I was around when interest rates hit 21%. I know real estate works in cycles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. That concludes 1134 Notre Dame Avenue. Next item on the docket is number 7, file number 24-4303, address 409 St. Anne's Road. Mr. Baracus, when you are ready, please. 409 St. Anne's Road.
Yes, one moment, please. I just okay. One moment. Okay. File number 24-430308, roll number 08003024-200, 409 St. Anne Road, 946,000. On the valuation, it's a 57, with no effective year built applied to it. 11 suites, 10 outdoor parking spots. It is at St. Anne's in Berrydale. Approximately no subject sale history on page 2. And on page 3 shows the income value workup. So we've got 11 units and they're all 1-bedroom units. We're not too far off from each other on the effective gross income we've applied. We're about $3,000 apart. Expense ratio of 52%, 52.5 roughly. And then a cap rate of 485 gets you to the 946, or about 86,000 per unit. And you've got our comparables on page 4. Pardon me. We are within the range of the nearby comparables. These are buildings that are comprised of 1-bedroom and bachelor units are subject. Comes in at only 1-bedroom units. Cap rate stuff on 5 and 6. And we've got an aerial picture on page 8 and a picture of the outside from Google on page 9. Then we have the actuals, the most recent actuals. So they're reporting 97. I think we're at what, 96? And then when I noticed this, one thing I did notice is the R&M seems pretty high on this one. it's in the most recent year, it's 40,178 divided by 11. You're at 3,600 per unit, which seems pretty high. So again, with this one, I just went with the model. Looks like we're similar in terms of income. The reported expense ratio on this does seem pretty high as well. 81,137 on the reported at 97,577. That's like an 83% expense ratio. I think that's probably carried a bit by the high R&M. So just went with the model on this one. I don't have any breakdown of the repair and maintenance, so just went with the model on it, which generates a value 86,000 per unit. That's my evidence. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor?
Yeah, sorry, one second here. I just following. Right. The great you brought up the maintenance and repair from 2022. Did you check for permits on this?
I probably did. I should have. That's part of my process. Of
No,
going
I'm
through
not.
it.
It's just that I'm not disagreeing with you. I
Yeah.
I think you spotted something there. That's
Right.
all.
Yeah. I should have, and I suppose I would have. I can take a look now.
But I can save you some trouble, and I know that there was work done on it. So my question is, based on that, was there a substantial change in the potential income? So you have the last one you provided was 121,800, whereas the previous year was 117,300. So that's going to be about sorry, what percentage that would be? About 5,000. So that's about 4%. So that's an above guideline increase, correct?
Are you talking from 21 to 22?
Yeah, exactly. So like, for example, you note that from 20 to 21, there was a increase of about $2,000, which reflects the RTB limit of that year. But from 21 to 22, it's an above guideline increase.
Right. Yeah. I'm looking at like 21. It looks like they did hot water tank and zooming in boiler replacement at 40,000, and they reported 13 and a half on the repair and maintenance. And then when you go to 22, they reported 40,000 in the repair and maintenance. Now, what I'm wondering, and it is, I guess it's post-reference evidence, what the rent would be in 2023, where if there was more work done, that would have been maybe like lumped into that R&M that might boost the rents higher, reflecting the current condition. That would.
Yeah, no, I'm not
Yeah,
exactly.
You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to make sure we get this right for the board and understand what happened here. And so you did have permit history on it, and then your model came up with a potential rent of 100,500, even though the RTB guideline is 121. That doesn't mean they're getting the rent, though, does it?
Right. So what I'm saying is maybe like the work they did in 2022, it might be something that could push the rents higher than an RTB in 2023. I think it was zero. I think this was like one of the last pandemic historical increase years. So I'm just not sure what I'm really saying is the R&M is higher than we typically see in it. I wish there was a breakdown for it.
But my question is, as this relates to, obviously work was done. was that period of vacancy noted in terms of the performance? Because we had it down as 21 having a income drop.
Yeah, because they reported 90,000 in 2021, and in 2020 they reported 93.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Okay. But thanks. I just want to make sure we get this clear. That those are my.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You. Mr. Seelan, any questions of the assessor?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Mon, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I have no questions either, other than Mr. Oh, I think you've got a map here. Yeah. 407. St. Anne's Road, 409. Okay, by Berrydale. Okay, that's my question answer. Sorry. Okay, and Mr. Neufeld, rebuttal evidence submitted, is that correct?
That is correct.
The same rebuttal, yes?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Harlan, can we confirm receipt of that rebuttal and it's in the evidence recorded?
Yes, we can, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready, please, 409 St. Anne's Road.
Thank you. So this incidentally is the handwriting and management is you notice signed by the same person. Smith Agency is involved in this as a partner, but ultimately there are other partners in it. So I wouldn't style its operations comparable to their actual owned properties. The Smith Agency owned properties are under a company called Gopher or United. This is a numbered company where they are a partner in. So nothing to do with the authority to sign. Dave Ross is the director who signed it, but the direction on the way it's run is different than their own properties, and you'll see that the operations are reflect that. The statements that were provided are really not representative of the way it's operated, because this was a renovation in 21, and it was extensive enough to cause some vacancies in 21. In 22, the income had come back to where it was. Now they had declared 97,577, and that's based on an RTB approval at 121,890. That's what's registered, and they don't get what's registered. But the way the system works, I don't know if you've ever had this explained, is that you can get increases from RTB. They have the normal one if nothing changes. It's in the last few years, it's ranged from 0 to 2% that they publish every year. You can get a complete lifting of the guidelines if you perform a major work involving 3 of the major elements, or you can request every year if you do any special work an above guideline increase. Believe it or not, one of the reasons you can ask for it is if your taxes went up. But that the reason the boiler replacement gets you an above guideline increase. So what you noted there was about a 4% increase that was approved by Residential Tenancies Branch as a result. And over the years, of course, they hope that they can move into those rents, but they're not. They're tapped out at 97.5. So the workup on this is that was presented to you is not what I think is appropriate. We should have used the higher number of income, 97,577, because that represents the growth from 2020. And the expenses, the assessor is correct, $40,000 is not appropriate. The work, just so we understand that the work was billed and paid for in the 2022 year, but was done earlier. So you have to look at the years in that basis. But when it was paid for, they had already released everything, and the earnings were back up to where they should be. So I figured that an appropriate number is closer to about I plugged in 11,000 rather than 40,000, and on the expense side, and then that reduces the expenses to from 81,000 to 52,000. And that's what should have been applied, I believe. So 97,577 would be our potential income. 52,138 are the expenses. The NOI is 45,449. And as far as the cap rate's concerned, I would disagree with the 7.14. I think the advantage this has is it's in the suburbs, and even though it's a smaller size, it would be of a good performer. Like, you know, whoever did this didn't care for the location. Yeah, on page 2, they marked 8 out of 10. No, it's a 10 out of 10. It's a good location for multifamily. But the only thing that's lacking on this is that it doesn't have enough parking stalls. And being in the suburbs, you do need parking stalls. And it's a bit on the smaller size. But again, it fits into our model at the higher end of the range at 6.5%. Capping that is 699,215, or 700,000 rounded. And that's my nothing new to add that I haven't said already.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Baracus, any questions of the applicant?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, any questions?
Yeah, could we just go over your numbers? You had a cap rate of 6.5%.
Right.
And can you just refresh me with your other numbers here?
Sure. Yeah, for gross income, if you look on page 1, it's the 2022 number, 97,577.
You said.
For expenses, I took off $29,000 in expenses because they had published a little over 40,000. So that changes the expenses to 52,138.
Okay.
And with an NOI of 45,449.
Okay.
And okay. And capitalized to 699,215 for value and rounded to 700,000.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Seelan. Mr. Mon, any questions of the applicant?
Oh, I don't. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, to summarize, you making a verbal request to revise the NOI to 45,449, capped at 6.5%, resulting in a request for a $700,000 market value.
That's correct.
Thank you. Any requirement for summary on either party?
I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Neufeld?
Sorry, I just noticed this, and I don't read his report. We were at the same NOI. So we got there by different routes. Our issue is the cap rate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes 409 St. Anne's Road. Last item on the docket, item number 8, file number 24-4120. Address is 200 Rupert's Land Avenue. Mr. Baracus, when you're ready, please.
Okay, thank you very much. One moment. Okay. File 24-4120, roll number 110102330000, 200. Assessed value 989,000. We got actual year built of 1950. Effective year built 1971, 11 suites, 4 outdoor parking spots. Uh, sorry. I'm actually going to make a recommendation on this property. So I'm going to agree actually with the applicant's income of 108,744, which is the subject property's income from 2020. And then I'm going to have an expenses of 64,474.50, which calculates an NOI of 44,269.50. And a cap rate of 4.75. And that calculates a recommended value of 932,000 rounded. So,
Okay, sorry, you don't mind repeating the NOI? I lost your transmission.
yeah, no problem. NOI is 44,269 50 cents.
Oh, that's what threw me off. You added on
Yeah.
50 cents. Okay.
Yeah.
44,269. Okay.
Yeah. And so basically what I did for the expenses, I looked at the 2020 and 2021 expenses. And what really stood out to me, it was the water in 2022. If you look at my page, 16, that shows the water was 20,600 in 2022. In the previous years, it was much lower than that. It was around 9,000 and then around 10,000. So it seems like it didn't make sense to me why it doubled. Other than that, like looking at the maintenance and repair based on the number of units, it looked reasonable to me. There was a strange dip in income. I mean, there's vacancy to consider, even though I wasn't able to ascertain it. I felt that the applicant's income was fair. They went with the 2020. I don't see any problem with that. So basically, the applicant's income, the average of the 2020 and 2021 expenses, with the modeled cap of 4 3/4. I'll just stop right there.
Thank you, Mr. Baracus.
You don't mind? Can you just repeat in revenue and expenses again?
Yeah.
108,744 for income. Is that it? And then the expenses?
64,474.
Don't put
50.
No, don't put pennies in.
Okay.
Okay.
This is the way it divided. Okay, I'll have to.
Okay, 64,474. Okay, yeah.
474. I don't think it makes a heck of a lot of
okay.
It's the same value anyway. Okay, so 64,474. Then NOI is 44,270 with a 4 3/4 comes out to 932,000.
Okay. Sorry, am I asking questions now? I'm past clarification.
Oh no, just if you're okay with the rec. If not, I'll continue presenting.
Oh no, you know what? I'm going to agree with you on the NOI, and I'll because you did see something that I was going to address anyway, and I'm good with that. 44,269. So we're just the cap rate is our only issue then.
Okay, awesome. All right, so this property is between Smithfield and Enniskillen, off Main Street. So kind of like West Kildonan, North End, kind of where the transition area is, off Main there. And page 2, there was a multi-role sale. There's like multiple properties that were encompassed in that sale. So I don't consider that as any sort of marker of value. They've been great handing in their mailers. And the cap stuff is on 5 and 6. I went online and just, took a look at kind of like what the inside looks like, because it had photos. Looks like it's been redone. Like, it's definitely not a 1950 something. This is where the effective age would come from. And you could scroll those pictures, which end on page 15. They go from page 9 to page 15, respectively. And then we have the mailers that fall in May. Not so good of a whiteout job on the other properties surrounding, about 200 Rupert's Lands down the middle. So again, use the modeled cap, and that calculates a per unit value of 84,727 on my rec. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, any other questions regarding the evidence presented by the assessor?
Yes, so just to confirm, the multi-role sale that you understand, that was for all three units, Smithfield, Maine, and Rupert's Land?
Yes, yes.
And the buildings are identical, similar? You're aware of that?
As far as I know, they're very similar from dockets past.
Okay, and you don't have an aerial view here, do you?
I guess I don't.
On its own, and I'm going to look at my picture in my page 1. Do you think that it probably doesn't have a very good parking ratio?
Yeah, that would be. Let me see here. What's the parking spot? 11 to 4. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. And on the income side, or the expense side of it, I'm going to sort of testify in a question. The water meter for all three is located in one building. That's what we're looking at. That's why it's so high.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah, 1 meter. However, the revenue, the caretaker's in another unit, so the caretaker has to be then allocated to this unit. So sort of a question, sort of a statement, but I'm agreeing with your number. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mon, any questions of the assessor?
I'm just wondering about renovations or permits. The pictures seem as though there's been some refurbishing or some cosmetic work on the outside. Do you have any information about that?
I probably look sometimes, like when properties get like new, like millwork and flooring, they don't always take out permits. I'll do a quick double check, because I would have put it in. But in the contents of my brief, I wouldn't have that information. You'd have to bear with me while I double check that there wasn't any.
Oh, that's fine then. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Then I don't have any other questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mon. Mr. Seelan, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have no questions either. Mr. Neufeld, before we start, I assume you've got a rebuttal to be repeated?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Harlan, please confirm the applicant's rebuttal is on record.
It is on record, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready, 200 Rupert's Land Avenue.
Right, as you can guess, I was planning on making changes, and very similar to what the assessor had, because if you look at page 3, the adjustment is the water's got to be split 3 ways, but on the other hand, the income has to be adjusted downwards for the caretaker whose suite is in 205 Smithfield. So at and when I had done my rough numbers, I was probably within $1,000 of what the assessor is suggesting for an NOI, and I think it's appropriate. So we're going to accept 45 No, 44,269, not the 50 cents, though. I'm objecting to 50 cents. As far as the cap rate is concerned, again, I think that again, we have a same problem as sometimes the people helping with the briefs don't understand the real estate. This was renovated, and it is a good location. The parking issue is, if you sold and marketed this separately, this building would suffer because it has less parking. But it was purchased as part of an economic unit, and it was always intended to be part of it. The expenses are shared. It physically would be very, very difficult to market these separately. So, give you an understanding, I'm trying to be consistent here. All the ones we've heard so far are smaller in size and smaller in units, and therefore the risk level of a smaller one is worse than a larger one. This would be considered a 33 unit complex, and as a result, it's got and it has some savings in terms of management, one manager for all 33 units, and an investor would favorably look at this for operating it. If there were a property today that deserves a better cap rate, it would be this one, because with the recent renovation, I know the scope of it. They made envelope upgrades, which help with the thermal efficiency. At the time it was done, and I'm just trying to recall the budget, I was looking for it. It was a few $100,000, and it was a good level of renovation. So I'm inclined to be, again, within our range, but at 6.25% as part of the larger economic unit. And that value comes to 708,304, 708,304, rounded to 710,000.
Anything else, Mr. Neufeld?
No, that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Barakis, any questions of the applicant's evidence?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, any questions of the applicant's evidence?
Just to clarify your cap one more time.
6.25%.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Mon, any questions?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. No questions.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify here, Mr. Neufeld, you're making a verbal recommendation to revise your NOI to 44,269, capitalized at 6.25% with a requested estimated market value of $710,000.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. I don't
Okay,
think we
thank
can
you.
call it a recommendation. I have to call it a request.
Okay. Either party require a summary on this property?
I'm okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, on this property, and then if you want to make a broader summary, you can proceed with that too.
So we're I wasn't paying attention. We're done then for the docket today?
We will be, yeah. Do you have any summary required?
Not specifically to this one, but just in general.
Okay, proceed in general, please. Well, first of all, no, go ahead, and then we'll do it.
Well, no, I don't know unless Matthew has something he'd like to say first, because he gets to go first.
Okay, then you know what? No, sorry. So we're going to conclude 200 Rupert's on Land Avenue, and now general summary, Mr. Barakis.
I mean, just looking at like looking at the properties on an overall valuation per unit basis, like it's the valuations that the city of Winnipeg put forward. I mean, they're mostly less than 100,000. I mean, if they were marketed as condos and sold as condos, would they sell for less than 100,000. I'm not sure, but we're valuing them as apartments. And I just feel that the smaller ones have a bigger pool of investors that will bid against each other over a stabilized NOI, which would cause the cap rate resulting from the sale to be lower. Therefore, I think the city valuations are fine as they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld.
Thank you. And again, not intending to be personally disrespectful, but I think that what Mr. Barakis has been saying through this day kind of represents a position that seems to be more anecdotal than analytical. At the beginning, I was very annoyed with the whole concept of the burden of proof, and maybe I can now bring that up again, but we still have to deal with the burden of proof, and it's not based on assumptions, anecdotes. It's based on facts, and the big problem with the assessment department's model is I can sum it up and characterize it on their page 5 and page 6. Most of this is cap rate issue. I will go out on a limb and suggest to you that every single rate here had preferential financing. And when preferential, not at the time, it was the appropriate financing at the time. But on April 1st, 2023, the interest rates were much higher, and therefore mortgages were higher, and that puts pressure on the cap rate to be able to afford to pay the mortgage. That's really what it's all about. A cap rate exists so that the banks know what number to put on it so the person can afford to pay their mortgage. Transaction doesn't happen if you're negative financing your property. So in the interest rate market of April 1st, 2023, any cap rate that suggests 4.7 is a realistic number would end up with a deficit on the ability to pay your mortgage. And as I said a number of times throughout the day, is that this is a strange situation that most Winnipeggers have not seen. We've lived for decades of plateaus and slight increases, and we've never run into a situation with a decrease. In the commercial market, investment market, what happened after COVID was virtually a freeze on sales. Nothing was happening. And the ones that did sell, apartments specifically, had a 1.75% CMHC guaranteed rate in place that they were able to adopt and then make the transaction. But nothing was transacting with the interest rates at the time because the people weren't going to buy it. It was let's wait another few years. That's why we reassess every 2 years. It's not a coincidence, and neither is it posturing that every single value I brought before you today is lower than the year before. That is reflective of true value, and that is what's happening in the market. There were some other factors, and I should have mentioned that there was an upswing in one part of the market. The refugee situation helped fill up a lot of the apartments which were heading for vacancy rates, but it didn't help with sales of units unless you had the preferential financing. I think that based on the burden of proof, I think the assessor should have brought forward how these rates were calculated and what the interest rate was on the mortgage and whether it was assumed or in place, because then we get a greater picture. And what you would see, and this is what we do for a living in our office, is a graph that goes up like, back on the screen, up like this on the cap rates that follows the interest rates that I've shown you, from 0.5% to 4.75% Bank of Canada. That impact has to be considered. And model making is, you see our mistakes in model making. We can only guess what the assessors are, but if you're sitting in an office and you're not on the front line selling these properties, you won't pick this up. In our break, fire alarm, I went down and spoke to the guy in our office who sells the apartment buildings. We have sales. We know where the market's going. We're on the front lines. So I don't think this is a time for a hypothetical application of rates. I think what we have to do is follow the legislation and say reassessment means adapting to market conditions, not leave the model running on the automatic increase. It goes down some years. This is one where it has to happen. Thank you for your patience today.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. We have heard all the items scheduled and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you to both parties for appearing, and you'll hear from us as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Mrs. Berlin, can you please put us in camera?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll be right back.
Thank you.
Thank you.